pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The mission of Region is a collaborative community committed to excellence to put every student active, ethical, and engaged in the global society through proven and innovative learning experiences supported by a strong community whose decision-making is based on the best interest of all students. So tonight's budget workshop is going to be started with a K-12 budget presentation.
I can hear the board and condense tonight from a controllable dollar amount. Most of the assets in our schools, I'm referring to teaching staff are assets, but salaries is the biggest line item in the budget. And then we're getting the controllable material budget. We kind of condensed it, so we can share those things tonight. Yeah. Anytime you are sending it. Yeah, we weren't duplicating. We've got an interesting technology afternoon. That should be. With that, I'll turn it over. We're starting this.
Good evening, everyone. We're excited to be sharing our budget presentation with you this evening. As Mr. Smith noted, we did keep it brief for you, and we'll just be sharing some of our highlights of the budget and our academic year as well today.
So, as Mrs. Miazza said, Region 15 Public School Mission Statement is the mission of Region 15, a collaborative community committed to excellence. It's to educate every student to be productive, ethical, and engaged in a global society through proven and innovative learning experiences supported by a strong community whose decision-making is based on the best interests of all.
We have the familiar paw print and won't read it all, but we hope that you'll see the through lines of the values and the mission of Region 15 throughout our budget presentation tonight. And we definitely strive to be welcoming and inclusive and strongly advocate for engagement and achievement of our kids. And the idea of cross collaboration, communication, and transparency is something that we try to live every day at the school level.
We are very fortunate here in Region 15 that we've been able to once again present a budget this evening that maintains a continued implementation of the strong academic areas that we promote in our schools, in elementary school, as well as the middle and high school. So we're going to continue to support our reading and writing programs K-5. Also the phonics programming that we have implemented beginning this school year. Math, we have our IM mathematics that are across all 4 of our schools this year in all grade levels K-5. We're also supporting the next gen science standards, our social studies framework. We're continuing to support our social emotional learning in a lot of different ways with a lot of different personnel as well. And we are extremely lucky to have our strong coaching and teaching support as we have implemented during this school year. All 4 of us have our 4 math coaches, our 4 ELA coaches in our building, as well as Dr. Burden, who works as a coach with us as well. So we're very lucky to have those supports, and in our budget, you'll see the continued implementation of them as well.
So overall, very little has changed in our final budget number compared to last year, 24-25. And the lines where you do see some movement is within textbooks and within refuge. As our mission statement of the region says, we strive to provide proven and innovative learning experiences to every child. And that means keeping up with new curriculum and new pedagogies as well for every student, differentiating to meet their needs. Our new math curriculum comes with new math textbooks, and the schools are now paying for that in 1 year to implementation. The shipping cost is a little more than our previous shipping cost, so that's a bump up in our textbook line. Part of our innovative practice is integrating the science of reading in our new phonics program, and that includes a new material called Decodable, which are tailored texts for younger students. Two of those pictures on the left show some of our younger students enjoying those decodables, which are used very explicitly within the program. It's one of those must-haves to teach it well, to teach it right. And on the right, you see some upper elementary students enjoying our new math curriculum. And those workbooks are part and parcel in retaining those skills that they learn from the different classrooms. We're going to turn it over now to the middle school, Rochambeau and Laura.
Good evening. As Ms. Pelican mentioned, we also been very fortunate at the middle school level that the board has supported our budgets over the many years. And we continue to offer much of the same initiatives as we have over the course of these years, and you've heard us present on these. These are still in progress, and we feel that they are well underway and very well supported by this project.
One of the key pieces of the instructional program at the middle level is the value of the teaming approach. So we appreciate the board's support and confidence in the work that we're doing at the middle school level to provide smaller learning communities for our middle school students that maximize opportunities for our teachers to know the children in front of them at the very best, for the children to develop quality relationships with each other, also quality relationships with the adults in front of them. So at the core of a middle school, a high quality middle school experience is that teaming structure, but clearly we benefit by the support for the instructional initiatives that we've been working through over the course of the last several years with the board and the community support.
So the changes in the middle school budgets, we want to just give you a quick overview. Relatively, it's a very flat budget for the middle level. There is a decrease in the property line in the Memorial Middle School library media budget, and that is due to the renovations that we did over the past couple of years that are pretty much complete. I know you've seen the refuse line, so that is something that is just coming into our budgets. And then any of the materials that we need for programming, there might be some slight increases in instructional supplies due to the rising costs of inflation.
Additionally, there'll be some additional funds that are allocated towards furniture for our property lines as we continue to modernize our classrooms and look to continue to engage students through innovation, looking at seating, looking at tables, particularly in science areas where we could ensure that there's equity in the experience across our department. One of the areas that you heard presented in the superintendent's budget is the addition of a CLP program. It's a collaborative learning program. We're excited to have this program added to one of our schools. We're in discussion to determine which school this program will be added. It's a therapeutic special education program that Dr. Greto shared a little bit about in her presentation to provide supports and services with students with needs that allow students to push in and out of this particular program, providing them opportunities to be successful, access the core academic program or unified arts offerings, but also benefit by the therapeutic supports that would exist within that program. It's a smaller learning cluster that would attract students who qualify from both Memorial and Rochambeau that would be housed in one of our particular buildings.
Hey, well, thank you guys for having me. I'm going to echo what has been said before. I cannot thank the board and our communities enough for the support that we've had over the past several years with our budget and some of the improvements and upgrades that we've been able to do over the past several years and look to continue to do. Recently, we hosted a basketball tournament, CIAC games, and the amount of compliments that I got from people from all over the state that were coming here was just amazing. Nothing but positive things to say about our facilities and the school in general. So again, I just can't thank you guys enough and the community for supporting us over the years. Our other purchase services, this line, is basically a continuation that we use from year to year. The increases, of about $11,000 in this line are due to increases across the board in all of the different line items. As you can see in here, it has to do with all fees associated with athletics, fees associated with officials, hiring of police, EMTs, the ambulance for certain events, our athletic trainer, impact testing are all included in this and everything else there. So there is a slight increase this year in that, and basically it's an increase in those services and the fees that we have to pay to those different groups that have risen. I've also put in the uniform. I know last year, one of the things that you as a board asked for was the uniform inventory and how that cycles go. So it's been updated obviously from last year with the purchases from this year. And the plan moving forward next year and the year after. So if you want to take a look at that at your convenience, you can as well.
There's no added cost, it's just the same amount budgeted for uniform to that cycle.
Our athletic supplies line has remained the same. We have no increases. Again, all of the different things that we purchase for supplies are listed in there. If you have any questions with that, you can let me know. The repairs and maintenance, this is probably the one line item that has seen the most increase as far as costs are concerned. And basically, these are all of the repairs and maintenance line, care and maintenance of all our playing fields, our athletic facilities, at all our schools, any repairs that are needed. And basically, this comes down to the increase in labor and material costs. You know, the same thing as, you know, with anything else. These lines have gone up in tune with what everybody else is charging across the line with this. For athletics property, this consists of any bigger ticket items that we purchase and or install for athletics, both at the high school and the middle school. There has been no increase in this line item. Some of the items that we're looking to get for this year is a new volleyball net system. The system that we have is just, it's old and needs to be replaced. As far as golf cart, that is for our athletic trainer, and we also use it in our PE classes and, you know, at athletics. The one that we have is, I believe, 20 years old. We've repaired it several times and it's just on its way out and not really doing too well. So field hockey goals at RMS, we replaced goals at both Memorial Middle School and at the high school this past year. We sent one of their sets of goals down to RMS to get through this year. And now it's just time to replace and give them a new set of goals. On the split air unit for our press box, we've had in our press box down at the stadium, the technology that has been put into that for so many different things that encompass the whole campus is a lot of it is located in there right now, and the degree temperature changes in the summer and in the winter are so telling that we need something in there to control the temperature. So Mike Murphy went out and got a quote for us for installing a split air unit in that press box so we can have a temperature control in there just to control all of that technology that we have in there right now. We are putting new fencing to kind of enclose the area where we put the new shed down at the storage facility down there, just again for safety purposes. This is one of the things that when we met with Brian McCurrier, our SRO, and if you guys have ever been to a football game, every kid, I think, in the whole region goes over into that area. We kind of want to block it off just for obviously safety purposes. And on top of it, it gives us more area for storage for bigger items like soccer goals and field hockey goals, and get them out of the way, and then that will be all enclosed in that area. Both middle schools are in need of scoreboards. I know the Memorial Middle School scoreboard was not working at certain point in times this year. We had to take our controller from the high school to bring it over to Memorial to get it. We finish out the basketball season. The RMS scoreboard has been, on its last leg for the last couple of years. So I got quotes for new scoreboards for both middle schools. Our ice machine at the high school up in the main building here has been on the fritz. That has shut down several times over the past year, and we've kind of band-aided that together. So we're looking to get a new ice machine. Auxiliary gym basketball hoops right now, in order to raise them or lower them, it takes the custodians to come in. They have to hook up a mechanical device to get those up and down. It's a very antiquated and older system. So we looked at a newer system that basically could be worked on with a remote control to do that. So that's something that if our PE teachers and our PE classes need to raise those or anything at night, it's a really simple task rather than taking, I think it would take about half hour to 40 minutes to put all the hoops up or down with the custodian going from each hoop right now. So we're looking to get a new system to make that a little bit more up to date. And then our lacrosse goals, these are just something that we need to replace every summer. The ones that we currently have are about 5 years old, and they get used so often. And I mean, nowadays with our practices being allowed in the summertime, they're even being used more. So they just need to be replaced next year.
Those basketball hoops, some ago when you were in school, that was the same hoops that were here when you were in school. So just throw that out.
Sounds like they work great.
It worked great then,
Yeah, basketball game.
So that's the main thing. So
Oh, okay.
you don't have that as an excuse. So good evening. I guess another way we can say thank you to you as a board and as a community. You have the 7 principals and an athletic director, of which only one of us is new in the last 7 years. And that was because we had a retirement. Stephanie's been wonderful as a replacement. You don't get that kind of consistency in school districts these days. Definitely not in the state of Connecticut. If you look up the average time for a high school principal, it's 3 to 6 years. So I made it. But that's also a way of saying thank you all to the board. We're still sitting here because of the work you do for us. And we're still working with this community because we believe in this community. And so again, thank you as all of my colleagues have said. I have some consistency in the presentation here. It's a pretty maintenance budget, starting with our core values that we like to always remind people of. I will say this will shift a little bit to the project or the portrait of a learner. If we go to the next slide there, that we will be at. So we start with our core values that were defined back in 2014, and then you go towards the theories of action, which are relatively done every year, are reviewed every year to build that school improvement plan. We have a school improvement plan that's online that reviews kind of where we're looking to go this year with goals and with objectives, with the idea that we're meeting that portrait of a learner. I'm really appreciative that some of you are able to be at our senior year experience. When you look at what the senior year experience is aimed to do, it is aimed to do exactly what the portrait of a learner is trying to say we are. So how do we measure the portrait of a learner? We're going to measure it through that senior year experience. They started learning critical thinking in those reading groups that Heather was talking about earlier. They started learning communication skills, or they honed their communication skills in those same classrooms that Michael and Jen were talking about. And we're showing that as a senior, they are now graduated with the portrait of what we want a Region 15 learners to be. In our budget this year, the 3 main things that stick out, and I'll start at the top. Other purchase services, this is an increase of 19,900. I believe that's a 50. This line is largely an increase because our decennial visit for NEASC is next March. So as you remember, when I presented to the board last year about the process, we had our collaborative visit last March. We then do our decennial visits. That's the actual accreditation visit next March. all of you will have more information about that as we get closer. There's actually places and meetings, just like in the last one, where Board of Education members are involved in talking to the team and committee. It's a larger committee and they're here for more days. Part of that process does involve us putting them in a hotel, us feeding them, and us preparing all the stuff, whether it's staff development or those things. And this increase is largely due to that accreditation that occurs next year. The instructional supply line is an increase of $23,600. This increase is largely due to what many of my colleagues have shared. Materials and cost of living is high. It's higher right now than it was. I use the example, we buy eggs, we buy a lot of eggs. We all have heard the stories of how high eggs are. We have to budget for where we are right now. And we want to be able to give our students the instructional supplies they need. The prices of eggs have doubled. We know that. So in some cases, especially if you're buying them in bulk, we have the same challenges that restaurants have in buying those. That goes across the board, whether it be paper, whether it be other supplies, things are just more expensive than they were. And I'm actually happy to say that it's only $23,000 when you look across all the different curricula we offer, whether it be a certification for drones, whether it be a robotics class, whether it be a physical education class, it's literally learning how to hike in the woods. We're offering all these experiences to the students. Meanwhile, as Dr. Chiappetta presented earlier this year, the achievement scores that we were able to do on our school report card showed that our school has rebounded since COVID at a greater rate than many of our colleagues or many of our schools in our dirt and in many of the schools that we compare ourselves to. So when you look at those test scores, you look at how we come back, the staff in this building have done a phenomenal job of getting the students back where we were 5, 6, 7 years ago. And that's proven in that data that Dr. Chiappetta presented earlier this year, whether that's SAT scores, AP scores, NGSS, or any of the other fitness tests, all the things that we measure, including attendance this year, which is drastically trending better. So I'm hoping that rides out. I hope all the seniors are watching and hear that, but I'm hoping that rides out. Last one is software licensures. This is not an increase. That's why we're transferred there. This was in Dr. Chiappetta's budget that she presented last year. Majority of this were new software for world languages. Much like anytime we do a new course, it stays in central office budget for the first year and then transfers to the high school for the years following that. This is that same process. So this is not an overall increase to the district budget, but it is an increase at the high school. Those are the three that you will see as a substantive increase.
All right, thank you so much, everyone, for your presentations. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Again, thank you very much. It seems like the length of the presentation is inversely proportional to the amount of people that are presenting. So maybe we have like 30 people come all at once, we can be over in like 10 minutes next year. I do appreciate the comment about the length of everyone's tenure, and I never seem to tire of saying, you know, I've been here longer, and I remember every one of your predecessors, and I would completely agree. And I will repeat this if anyone asks, that this is by far, I think, the best crew I've ever seen in terms of, from my perspective, where it seems like you all work together and aren't necessarily trying to one up each other or hoard resources or things that just I absolutely would hear about when I first was on the board, and also the amount of parent complaints that really should never be coming to us anyway, as we have really no kind of control over responding to them other than to direct them to the superintendent or back to you. But anyway, those are like practically non-existent. So yes, it's not an invitation. So I did have some questions for Mr. Blaski specifically. Just out of curiosity, what were they complimenting, like when they came to see, just because it's nice to hear about that. It's just like, what were they like, because they were in the gym, I'm assuming, like, was it
They complimented, I mean, obviously they have to come up through the whole, up Judd Road and around the school. And when they come to the gym, they get to drive around the whole entire school. But The compliments were, what a beautiful, campus we had. They complimented our facilities, down at the, playing fields and stuff as they went by. I actually had, a guy that I know from Southington, when he came here early to drop off his friend's elderly parents so they could get in early. Then he went down to the field with his son and another kid, and they were throwing the football around and they were, complimenting, how nice the facility was and everything else. And then just everybody just raved about, our facilities, the gym, the indoors, and again, tribute to the crew that I'm able to put together for these events, just how well everything was run. The CIAC was extremely appreciative, and I received many emails from members of the basketball committee and the CIAC, and just, being able to host a big event like that. We had the semifinals for the girls doubleheader, and we were able to bring in 4 schools here. We were able to, accommodate them, meet all their needs, and go above and beyond what most schools are able to do. And they said the facilities are just, remarkable in their eyes.
Okay, thank you. And then, do you have, like I was thinking about the athletic property slide where, you were talking about all the different things. Yes. And then, just like when we talked about the scoreboard at the high school field, like how do you have this ability to like the gate fee money and all, like, is that, I know that's I think tracked through your office or through, I think, but like, why wouldn't that have maybe turned it on here? And the reason I'm asking is I think from a board perspective, I found it very surprising that, because I'm not down there anymore, that we needed a new scoreboard, but that's fine. And then that we had money to pay for it, that was like from kind of all these different funds. And so personally, I would love to sort of get you out of that, if you need a new scoreboard, like make sure it's on here. And so how does that work? Like,
So basically, the need for the scoreboard at the main field came up this year. That scoreboard was antiquated and went down. So Dr. Jones and I met, Mr. Martino and Mr. Smith, we all met, and we kind of looked at, what we had available at the specific time to be able to get that done for this year. That's why we were able to come up with the funds that we take through gate receipts and so on and so forth for that specific thing. Again, from year to year that differentiates, depending upon, the how well our teams do, how well the games are attended and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, so I guess the question you're asking is, can we?
Yeah, like we're doing all this capital work, like, and we're trying to track these big line item projects, and then we've got also these things too, and it just, from a board perspective, it would be nice not to be surprised that A, we were in need of something, and then B, that the money came, from these other sources. Like, what if we didn't have that and you
Right.
needed to?
I mean, that was one of the things that we looked at several years ago, like being able to, with that money, put it back into athletics and back into the schools in any way, shape, or form. So we've been doing that all along, just in smaller increments, and then we didn't have to purchase a $50,000. Again, the scoreboard, the crazy thing about the scoreboard is it's less than $20,000. The installation is about, 30.
The original plan would have been the scoreboard to be here. When we started this year, we thought it would limp along. And then over the course of the fall, it continued to fail, and our Band-Aids didn't hold it together. And so what would have happened if we didn't have the money in those accounts to purchase it, it would have been on this list, and it would have taken other things off this list.
I guess we don't need to use the word, like, again, transparency. If someone says to me, why are we collecting those fees? Like, I can either say, well, we bought a scoreboard with them, or like, I don't know, but I know where I can go and find out. And it's just a little more transparent when you sort of have the visibility. That's a kind of really just just the genesis of it, because we had all sorts of emails about athletic fees, right? And so it's nothing's wrong. I think we should just have a better eye on this. That's all.
I'm sorry, I'm a little confused. So these are the line item in the athletics budget is to help support the property. Are you basically saying that if we are having gate fees and a pool of money that's being generated as revenue, why isn't that being used for this? So it minimizes the line item?
I just
I'm
think
sorry,
we
I'm
need
not
better
following.
visibility to, it, right? So we can do an audit and have an auditor come and talk about all this, however 99, whatever the budget was, and we can have a bond and labor over, and I don't see why that doesn't translate down to that there's this pot of money that I'm not saying anything nefarious is happening at all.
I think we're talking about two different things. One is a line item property in the budget, and the other is we've got money that's being collected from a different fund that goes into the operational budget, right? And how's that being utilized? Is that kind of what you're asking?
Money is being collected and just being utilized for, like,
The
this
general
scoreboard,
fund,
paying like
Paying
refs
referees.
and all that. And
Okay.
that's, I don't want to spend any more time. Want to make the point that again, the rest of the board maybe could care less. I just felt like this is something that maybe we should have a better eye on. And then, so my follow-up question is just, was gonna ask if you had any opinion on pay for play fees being lowered for the middle school. Because some people had written in for that. And we promised that we would discuss that. And so, like, why might I lower or vote to lower pay for play fees when, for all I know, there could be, a lot of money sitting in some account somewhere that could offset some other expenses that could in turn, we move money around. So I guess my question is just your opinion on has anyone ever, have you ever found that it'd be great to lower those pay for play fees because people have come to you? So,
I have had a lot of conversations on it, and in my past life as a teacher and working in a different district, the pay for play fees for the middle schools were a little bit lower. And to me, it kind of makes sense because they're not getting the same, they don't require the same amount of time. They don't require they don't play as many games as the high school teams and stuff like that. But it's one of those things where I think you have to look at the big picture to see if there's, pros and cons to it and go from there. But
okay.
I've never really, studied it. I've seen it done both ways in different districts.
Okay. And just to be clear, like in anything I've asked, like I'm not upset about anything. It's just trying to get a better handle on stuff. And then lastly, and it might be a question for Josh that has to do with the book. I'll just direct it to you. So because I forgot I had this question. So there's line items in definitely the K through 8 schools. So line item 127.111, which is instructional data coach. And all the schools except one have like big increases. And then there's another one, 211.11, which is certified special ed teachers. Like those, is that like
That's a
it's like a
reclassification of the math coaches.
So before, we
okay.
only had
That's what I
two
thought.
math coaches, they weren't allocated for building, so now they've been allocated.
That's fine, because I was like, that's a lot of, but that makes total sense.
Just 1 second, the activities, so obviously that allocation of money gets audited every year as far as the ins and outs inside that fund. And that 1 year, I think we had like a couple of years where extra money accrued, I think, that was when we switched over from.
Yeah, it's when the athletic passes went from the PTO
Correct.
to the athletics department.
Yes.
And that was the chunk of money that
Yes.
we used to kind of drive this conversation, because with student activities, you shouldn't let the money stay in there for years and years. It should go to the students who put the money there. And so it doesn't have to be immediate. That coupled with the sponsorship, the new sponsorship signs, which since it's a public meeting, if anyone's interested, there is a sponsorship program if people are interested in having a sign at the stadium. But those two things really where that amount went. And so then while we use student activity funds and have forever on purchasing smaller property items, that gave us a larger amount of money that we needed to spend. And that was something we needed to spend That's just for those interested, that this will be our third scoreboard at the stadium in the 50 years of this school. The first one lasted 25 years, the second one was 20. This campus obviously started in 79. Started in Pop Rock, we were still at South Perry High School, transitioning there. So it's about time when you think about the increase of amount of sports that have played on that.
Absolutely. And the 211.111 is certifying special ed teachers, so that would not be a reclassification. So are we just adding more?
Which schools?
Well, like all of them except PES, like that 211 has gone up by, I mean, I can look it up and someone else can talk and I can come back.
We did have some additions, I know, and if you can see some shifts just in general salaries, too, depending on who their position got vacated and when shifted over.
So there's two factors in that. One is the sharing of the reading services that Jessica talked about with the Wilson train. But the other, some of that is also due to like special ed teacher left the district, we tried a new one at a higher rate. One of the things that you're going to see in the refuge or the garbage services is kind of the most obvious example. We always had garbage services in the district, but you'll see like an increase at the elementary school from $6,000. It's not really an increase. The state does a report where it's called the EFS report, where they want to calculate the cost per building. Before we aggregated that garbage into one line item for budget purposes and then had to go and recode everything in order to submit that report. So we started breaking it out when we submit the report. That's our.
So it's disaggregated. So MES is up 99,000 at that line item.
MES added a teacher.
Okay, GES 43,000.
MES was the classroom that we added. We added the CLC classroom at MES. That's
okay. GES 43,000. LMES 82,000, MMS 106,000, and RMS 24,000. So those are a lot of thousands. I just wanted to keep track.
we can break it out. We'll give it that word.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Sharon. So thank you so much. I think I asked this question, but I just put my mind at ease. The CLP at the middle school. Can you talk a little bit about the impact to space and where I'm specifically going is there any impact to instructional learning or class sizes as a result of including that into either of your schools?
As far as space goes, we have to determine which school can house the program. How many students would be eligible to participate in that program, so that would draw from both of our schools. As far as impact, with students pushing out into.
Would you take any existing classrooms and repurpose that space, ultimately resulting in a reshuffling, recalculation of existing class size or projected class size?
It would require us to take a look at existing space. No, we would not be consolidating instructional spaces, but we would be purposing a space and looking at how we might carve out appropriate room for, quite that particular program that's more central. Just on where's the available classroom space and drop it in. We want to be very mindful about where that's located so students feel supported and access. But as far as accessing their core academic, a successful program allows students to go into the core academic classes and be more successful in those settings, because this program provides the therapeutic support that quite honestly that we're missing at the middle level. This is also a program that exists at the elementary level. It exists at the high school level. It doesn't exist in its fashion at the middle level.
I will say for the elementary, we do have a CLP program in Long Meadow. And there is always a seat in the homeroom classroom for that student. For when they join the classroom, there's a desk for them, there's a name tag for them. So they're still a part of that community, and then they flex in and they flex out as needed. So it really has a net zero impact on enrollment when we talk about making classes for next year.
Okay, but that would be worked into any class size that you project. So there's that level. So regardless of where it's housed, we would be able to see that, and you showed what the anticipation was. Okay. My other this is kind of a logistical question. I'm just curious. At pickup, we often have traffic issues, right? And some of those become very dangerous situations. And sometimes we have police officers that are out there directing traffic. Is that a cost that is incurred by Region 15?
Yeah,
And
that's.
where does that sit? in our
That sits in
budget?
professional services. That's part of the two rovers that exist. But the town of Suffolk integrates that into kind of the rover bill. So it's not, years ago, it was a separate charge, like $15,000 with traffic. But now they folded it into the overall rover position. So I want to say it's approximately $60,000 you would pay for the Suffolk rover.
And that would include like them directing traffic on
Correct.
Main Street. And if there was a need due to safety to increase that, that's a conversation that you guys have with the town and then you would, so that's currently flat. I bring this up because it was a very interesting situation as I drove down past the middle school today. I'm never down that road at pickup.
Yeah.
Overtime is
Yeah, they're
dangerous.
busy. Yeah,
Very
the
dangerous.
pickup lines are long.
And it becomes a one lane road and very easy to get in. So it made me think like, who's
As I
paying for
look
that?
across, so like
Yeah.
PEF, Long Meadow has
Yeah.
issues.
Field.
Millbury Elementary, we have police directing traffic
Yeah,
there
they're
in the
out on the road.
afternoon. Memorial is actually a pretty good place. Gatefield, we often back, in the mornings are pretty good, but in the afternoon, we back to that one lane bridge. Over by Gatefield, yeah, I do, and we've noticed post-COVID, the amount of parent drop-off and pickup has increased for a lot of different reasons. I do think depending on where you live in town, some of our bus runs are 55 minutes. So sometimes it's more efficient, but as I look at my table there of administrators, the amount of time they spend trying to make efficiencies, some of it is structural. MES has improved a little since we redid the parking lot. Long Meadow needs significant PES, there's only so much we can do. With pick up and drop off.
Okay, I actually think that number should go up from a safety perspective, because I don't think it's enough. I mean, not the money, but just directing traffic and making sure people are safe, but.
Well, compounding that, especially even if the money was no object, the amount of available officers.
Oh, that's a
often
limitation.
is a limitation, yeah.
And then just, so I was really, I appreciate your comment about the science, room and the equity to our children in the classroom. I know when we did the tours, I was like, I really hope to see a science lab. Hopefully that will get baked in future budgets, but I appreciate that you're kind of keeping that up, because I think that students really need to have that experience. If they're teaching science, it should be in a lab type setting, so appreciate that. And then just to piggyback on Steve's comment related to it, we heard a lot about gate fees and pay for play. If there's any way we can kind of look at that, and really, I think the middle school, when we looked at the facilities use policy, I think that was, I appreciate Steve bringing that back up. That was a significant outlier, and I think if we can reduce those at the middle school, that would be really very valuable.
Reduce gate fees
Or the middle school pay for play. Pay this side.
Sally and then Tom. Is this a spot for board discussion?
Well, what?
Board fee discussion, because I just wanted to bring up also, as we're kind of talking about gate fees, was the was gate fees for potentially kind of adding adding to the cost of the pay to play, but including with it, the access card for the family, so that you're not paying for a kid to play and then paying to go to every game and paying to go to senior night and paying to, and how that adds up. We had talked about trying to work something out with other together. I would hugely in favor of that. I don't know if that's something we can do this year, but I just want to put that out there as that's something we hear a lot.
Pardon my train of thought on this, but since we were talking about parent pickup, Steve, Mary and I were at an event in Heritage Village, a week or two ago. And the number one issue that was brought to our attention was how come in the morning we drive by the buses and we see so many buses half empty is being generous. We were also told with 2 or 3 kids on them. So I know it's not budget related, but since we were talking about parent pickup and since this is something that was recently brought to us, could we just take a moment to just talk about what we are required to provide in terms of transportation, especially in a changing environment where more and more people are dropping off during COVID?
Yeah, and I would say it's a multi-pronged approach because you also have the length of the ride. So when you look at the fact that, I don't have the math on the top of my head, I think when you combine Southbury and Middlebury, we become maybe the fourth or fifth largest. Did I say six? I couldn't remember. Did I put it in my answer there? Because I plan on going through some of those questions quickly tonight, but you know, we're the sixth largest geographic town. You know, we talk about busing. So one is that we have to provide a ride to school for every child. And how we do that when there's no sidewalks is frequently we're going door to door. There was a period of time where the district tried to stop going down all cul-de-sacs. That did not move, that was before my time, and did not move well within the community, especially when you look at some of the long cul-de-sacs we have. So there are some choices, but we do have to provide a ride for every child. There are some districts that we hedge a little bit too. We don't necessarily, if every child was to get on the bus tomorrow, we wouldn't have a bus district. So we do hedge that a little bit, but you can't hedge it too much because then you get into like, if we want to do 1.5-hour bus rides, we would cut some buses. We also don't pay per run, we pay per day. So when we get a bus, maybe the middle school bus doesn't have a lot of students on it, but the elementary school bus has more, or the high school bus. So like, and it can't be like I signed a waiver and I don't need a bus this year, but 3 weeks from now, my job changes or my, and now I need a bus. And we say, too bad, so sad, you signed this waiver. That doesn't work that way. The family needs a ride, you have to provide for it. So that is the back and forth that we have every year with the bus company. How do we get more efficient? There's tipping points. So, if the bus is half full or even a third full, it's not like we can get rid of the bus because I still have to send the bus down that road. And so unless we can find efficiencies this year, after I think the first month of school, if no child got on that stop the whole month, we called the family and said, you need us a ride. That didn't necessarily save busing though, that saved the length of the bus ride. So maybe if they were faster getting to school or the bus ride was shorter, but that would have to happen at 50 houses in order for us to get rid of the bus. And the logistics of that just are seldom. I think that the fact that we're the 6th largest geographic area, I came from the largest in my time prior to this, and the bus line was one of the highest in the state. We just have so much territory.
I could ask one follow-up, and this is another question that was asked of us. Is there any cost savings to be achieved by moving from the large school buses to smaller vehicles? Have we looked at that?
Yeah, so we have like some of our hard to reach stops, we send vans down there. Some of them we have 55 student vans or buses instead of 65, some of they're smaller buses. I'm looking at this Martina.
As I always say, it's the cost of the driver and the liability. The bus size, there's some, but it's not much. I want to say literally the price is like $10 different.
Fuel savings.
Very low.
Liability mean insurance?
Liability insurance, all the driver training, obviously drivers' benefits and salaries. Yeah, all those things really go into the biggest cost.
Next time we go there, we're taking.
Yeah.
We went less.
I mean, it's by the end, we're like, yeah, why are they empty? Like, that makes no sense.
We
Like,
did stand up for you guys though and say that you guys do ask parents to ride the bus and that parents choose to, drive their kids. Then one of them said to me, do you drive your kid? And I was like, it's bonding time. I'm caught.
She drives herself.
I got all red.
I would say too, though, that
Secret safe with me.
not anymore.
It's like confession.
I will say too, that part of the problem with the, I know by the middle school, I don't know if it would matter if we had a police officer out there. There are so many cars, and if they're not pulling in and parking and waiting, or they all show up at the same time, I don't know that the police officer there is going to make a big difference in moving things around. It just, sometimes it's just the timing. You've got to time it just right, or you've got to bank on that person that's taking a right into the parking lot to let you take a left in. It's rough, but if everybody did kind of pull in and moved up, I've been there, it does make a difference.
I just don't, I think if they're all lined up on that side waiting to turn it, were you in the morning or the afternoon?
I was traveling home from conferences.
Oh, it's afternoon. It's, the timing is everything down there. I was just curious where it hit, if it was town, if it was Region 15, you answered my question. Certainly it's an infrastructural issue as far as I'm concerned, right? But
It only lasts about 7 minutes.
Yeah, it is.
But it's
Dangerous
right
enough.
up red
Long
on Google
enough.
Maps.
Yeah.
yeah, the rest offline, yeah.
Long Meadow, we have optimistic plans to be able to,
Yeah.
when we redo the parking lot, then you might be able to change some of the traffic pattern. But the bus lot's there too, so Long Meadow has buses returning, so it is smiling. We talk about it a lot.
Yeah, just a mini bus is $430 a day and a full size is $433.
Wow.
So they're-
$3.
$3.
And we pay, the cost for the entire bus is about $63,000 a year. And that
Yeah.
includes the ride, you know, so when we add a bus, size that, you know.
But it is also, it's beyond it's also the volume, when you think about the size.
We just cover a lot of ground. I mean, it's just, there's.
No, but I mean, like, a large bus takes up a large space.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean. Bus truck on the road, or bus on the road.
I have the answer to Steve's question. I'll move back to the salaries.
Oh, thank you, guys.
So if you took like PES, for example, page 2, the line's up $103,000, 4.28%. There's 28 staff members in that line. I'd say approximately 65% are moving on step. So the way the teacher's contract is done, that's actually raises against that line.
Against the certified
if you-
special ed teachers.
Well, the south, well, which page you on for that?
You rolled the whole 100.
Yeah. Oh, Steve's probably further back in the.
Yes, there's like a,
But BES has a higher percentage of special education teachers because of the concentration of programs there, so.
theirs was the only one that went down.
But yeah, the
It
line,
went- That's
I
that
think
one.
because we have a new staff member, so you know, like when
think
somebody
their line
leaves,
item-
then you hire a new person, I think, because we didn't lose any staff. I think it might have just been that.
I think it might.
It's, you can tell, I just.
Yeah.
Sorry, sorry, right.
You read it.
I was like, whatever.
Any other questions?
You can tell.
So, also thank you all for coming in. I kind of want to piggyback a little bit on what Sharon said about, just acknowledging the strength of the middle school, science program. So we hear a lot and wanting to be supportive of that. I know we talked about the equity in lab space and I don't know if I'm just misremembering this, but was there something about open sci ed and access to some of the materials? And I'm just wondering if that's covered in this budget or if there's anything else you foresee sort of like changing down the line in terms of the science curriculum needs.
Well, I don't see over the course of the next few years anything really changing, and I do think that right now we are very well equipped for the open ed resource. One of the increases in our budget is that we purchase non-consumable items in the past few years. Therefore, we're really set up for success. It's been something that we continue to work on and improve.
Any other questions? I have a question about the CLP space at the middle school. I was surprised to hear that we have CLP space in the elementary schools and at the high school, but not the middle school. How have you guys managed that need without having a program? Like, what's been the impact?
So if we look at our current structure, we have a learning center program for our high need special education students at RMS. We have a flex room set up at Memorial to support students who flex in and out, but both of those do not have the benefit of kind of a therapeutic type setting to provide the students who need it. And I think this is something we have supported students who have come to us that have experienced challenges in a wide variety of ways. One, we have a very talented special education staff. We have tremendous counselors. We have a social worker. We have school psychologists. So we're triaging constantly, but the work that we're doing is not therapeutic for the child's needs. So we've been trying to make do as best we can, and I think we're seeing students who have benefited from that type of program at the elementary school setting now coming to us. And we need to ensure that we provide them that same quality of program support so they can be successful. And it really is a case by case basis for students who benefit by that type of structure and that type of support.
I think Michael said everything. I think, as we mentioned, our special education staff, our school counseling staff, our school psychologists, administration, we all step in where we're needed, when we're needed. But providing that flexible space for students who, might be trauma affected or might have some needs that go a little bit more beyond than what we normally address. I think that is such a critical, it would be a critical help to us and to the students so that they can, have every chance to set them up for success at the next level. So
In the extreme case is also that we found alternative settings for students, which, you could argue that that's not the best setting for them to be in. It's really hard to transition back once you're in that place. It's also the least cost effective.
alternative settings, meaning sending them away to a different school. Okay. Just want to explain it to anyone listening.
So can I piggyback on that a little? So we're talking about one CLP class or classroom to be shared by both middle schools. So would there be an instance where a child may move in and then move back to their respective middle school? And if you're thinking numbers wise now, is one classroom at one middle school enough?
I personally think so. Michael's this sort of flexible program that he currently has in his building is available to students who live in the Memorial District. The program that we have at Memorial that's also flexible is available for the students who live in the Rochambeau district.
So we're kind of doing it, but not with the tools that would make it better.
Well, we're doing it, but in terms of different needs. So there's a specific program at Michael's building that addresses a certain level of need. I have a different level of need at my building. Very different students.
Got it.
Very differently designed program, but both with the ability to flex into the general ed classrooms and then flex back out.
And we think they could flex in wherever this classroom is and then back eventually to their home school.
Yes, and the beauty of a flex type program is that the students they do have a parallel schedule where we try to always have them flex in and then we can flex out when we need to. And one of the main differences in the CLP program is that we would want a therapeutic setting, so it would be available to those students all day.
So the same structures in place at the elementary now. So Chris has the program in his building where if there was somebody in one of our buildings that could benefit from the CLP program, they would kind of magnetize to this CLP program, very similarly to what the structure would be at the middle schools.
Right, and it's only year 2 of our having that CLP program, so it kind of been newly rolled out below the high school.
When we think about space, we only have one classroom in high school. So all the students that are in the middle school, when they come here, we only have that one classroom, and that's what we need. So I do think I would echo space thing. It's what we'll capture.
Thank you.
So would the plan be to keep the programs you have now and add the additional, and is there a chance that those could almost serve as like step down? If we let's say put students at Memorial, if they say the CLP classroom is at Memorial and then they go to Rochambeau, I'm imagining that's a big jump going from CLP over to another school and not having any support. Like is there a way to configure that?
Certainly, I think anything is always possible, but really these placement in these programs is IEP driven based on testing that indicates varying degrees of need.
Right, I'm thinking about the transition that flex.
Whereas the program that I have in my building, I would not see kind of like that overlap between students who are currently in our learning center, because that is a much higher need than support for those students that I don't see that there's a lot of overlap between CLP and learning center. Very
Any other questions?
I'm gonna close out Steve's question.
Oh, okay. Joe?
So, no, but it's an interesting point too, with just salaries in general. So in that line, you had a look at either transfer or retirement that happened, like in Long Meadow, for example, or, top set teacher, incoming, bidding salary teacher, this shift is like 50,000. So, that alone is what moved that line, raises. So it's kind of like, it's where some of the salary are tricky, because with retirements and transfers and ins and outs, there's a lot of shifting inside. So yeah, no FT change, just it looks like, one, possibly two, either retirement or transfers out of those positions, and we then replace them with some lower salary.
Wouldn't the line item go down if we replace them with lower? It sounds like.
No, from the, sorry, they're shifting in, yes, sorry, correction. You had teachers that were, looks like you had two transfers in higher salary. You're 522 in the prior year from Long Meadow, and now you're at 610. So the shift. Wrong.
We'll touch on it again when we questions. If there's an answer to a question that speaks to that.
Any other questions? Thank you so much for coming tonight. We absolutely value everything that you do for our students. Very much appreciate you coming tonight, and very much appreciate everything you do for our students. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Next, we have review and discussion of budget questions led by Superintendent Smith and Mr. Martino.
So appreciate everybody sending us questions. Some of them came in late in the week, so we did our best to try to adjust and answer as much of them as possible. Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Passed out, and what we're trying to do, some of the questions that came in touched on questions we had spoken about before. So while I tried to keep it clean, it's not as clean, because the first question, for example, around class size, one of the questions talked about this year, and originally we had put in there only the projected numbers. So I went back and added in current numbers so that people can see. And then we tried to put some context in here, that class size projections. We look at the number of sections that we're going to need based on the demographics report and current enrollment. Kindergarten has the largest volatility. We don't know, the rest of the students are here, so we have some conversation. So beginning in February, when kindergarten registration starts, we monitor that on a pretty regular basis. And then beginning in July, we look at weekly, we have enrollment updates at the elementary school level, because if students move in, we're kind of close to margins. And when you start getting into some of the schools that have 2 and 3 sections, one student shift or one teacher shift one way or the other has a different impact on the class size when you can, as opposed to have 5 or 6 sections and you pull a section out. So after the budget passes, we try to the extent possible to work within the FTE number that was approved at the budget time. There've been a couple of years in the past where we couldn't do that, and we come to the board and we say we're going to add a teacher. I think one of the charts that we have in here will highlight that. So that's where we were last year, or where we are now, 24, 25, and then where we are projecting for that. I think that was the only piece that we didn't answer before, so I'm going to skip all the way down to put a page break and a new header, starting with tonight. Questions updated page. That's page 7. So one question that came in was this perception that Region 15 was over budgeting, and that could we explain the difference between overruns. And so I put some some differences between us and a traditional municipal school district. In a non-regional school district, if the school district has unexpected cost overrun, they can go to the town and ask for a special appropriation. It happens. One district had $1 million overrun in special education 2 years ago. One not too far from us had a $300,000 overrun in special education. They went to the town, the Board of Finance in that town voted and gave them a special appropriation, and that was it. We don't have that luxury. We stand alone. And so if we have budget overruns, there's nowhere for us to go, and we would have to go to a full referendum and ask the community to show up vote in order to do that. That would be a really bad place for us to be, and we never want to be there. And so that may be some of the question that's out there. And I talked about the shift in the non-lapsing account that we're working on a policy for. Before that, non-lapsing could only pay for capital items. We could not use that for any other overrun, which partially created our need to have that special ed contingency fund. I think there's been some confusion about the year-end balance. So as to the extent possible, put links in here to minutes from finance committee, board meetings, budget meetings, wherever there's a link. We're trying to put people right to where they want to look at. But the assumption last year, or I think it was last year, that we were over by 1.2 million, didn't go to the third page. Actually, on the second page, we also highlighted in yellow. You have to look at the revenue shortfall. The reason that we're so hot with Hartford and the excess cost is the impact to our revenue. So you couldn't just look at year-end balance without looking at the revenue hit. Part of the reason that balance was there is that was manufactured, and we slowed spending in other places to absorb the cut that we took from Hartford. And then again, there's a link in here to the June 24 Finance Committee meeting that you can point people to. The end of year spending last year was something that we reviewed with the Finance Committee. Typically, we hold back dollars over the course of the year because we don't know what kind of winter we're going to have. We don't know if there's going to be overtime, if there's going to be a flood, if there's going to be any other natural disaster. And then as the year kind of starts to come to fruition, we start to be able to say, all right, we have some space in these areas. The list of things that broke during the school year or are about to break, now we can start fixing them. Obviously, if there's any emergency, we reallocate that early in the year, but the things that are concerned, we start to address that. One of those last year was the gym AC unit. That was a $300,000 repair. That wasn't a surprise. It's broken. We need to fix it. And what's the best way to fix it? So that was talked about at that finance committee in June, and we put the minutes in the link. The question on the $232,000 in fiscal year 24 year-end balance, that was part of our audit. We haven't moved on that yet. My understanding is that the board wants to create the new non-recurring account and set policy before we transfer that money in. But we always wait until the audit to make sure that our year-end balance is an audited year-end balance. I talked a little bit about the surplus. I don't really like to.
I'm sorry.
Yep,
Just to go back to that one. So after we made capital repairs with the surplus that we ran last year, there was this amount, 232. That number has yet to be transferred to an account.
Correct. As of right now, it's sitting on the CAFR in the correct place. If the board chose not to allocate it there, it would then, the next audit would flow to the town. We took no action on that.
So where is it sitting now?
Right now, it's sitting on the CAFR in the correct, in the
What is that,
education,
Joe?
sorry, our big audit filing, our certified annual audit.
Okay.
So in there right now, it's in the education expense account in the audit. We've not moved the money all,
Okay.
but on the.
So that
audit
doesn't
side.
show up in the balances.
So right
Yeah.
now it sits there. It doesn't sit on
Sits
any
in
of our
last year.
last year.
It doesn't show up in our-
So if the board say took no action between now and June 30th, we do our next audit, that 232 would flow back to, remember towns, you would take a no action on the money for that transfer.
So if I understand that correctly, at some time between now and June 30th, the board is likely to
Yep.
realize that $232,000
Right.
in either educational expense
Or
or in
capital,
capital
yes.
non-recurring.
Yes.
So we are due to receive another $250,000 into one of those accounts.
Yes, yeah, and it'll take action, put that in.
That's good to know.
There's another way of doing, it, which I think is more complicated. you could authorize the transfer before the audit closes. So you could say, we authorize a transfer up to 2% of the operating budget. The problem with that statement is that would assume you would have like a $1.8 million surplus, and our surplus is generally never that high, and that's a big number. So I think if you do like a blanket like transfer statement, it doesn't show the real balance. We do it kind of after. I think when the audited balance is done, we know that's a solid number, and then you make your transfer. Been doing that for.
And yeah, that always goes into a non-lapse. Yeah. Can't transfer it into an operating.
For some reason, I thought that already moved to capital non-recurring, so it's
Nope.
nice to know that all it's there.
I'm not a big fan of the word surplus, you know, unexpended amount. I'm not looking to be technical on it, but surplus means we didn't need it. And really, this is the winter, we didn't use as much heat as we anticipated. It's a little different than a surplus. So I put in just some answers there, but all of this, every month we go through the finances at the finance committee. We talk about the accounts that are under encumbered, the accounts that are over encumbered, and what expenses we expect between now and the end of the year. The debt service piece, I know that there's some questions out there. I did put a link to the March capital presentation in there. The other thing that Mr. Martino did was when he met with our bond consultant the other day just about our current bond, but we had him run a scenario that if we took those roofing projects and the turf field that are in that capital presentation and we went to bond for that $5 million instead of paying it with the unrealized bond debt payment that we plan on doing. Well, that is one process that Mr. Martino and I think we should look at. You're talking about a $450,000 annual payment for 20 years on that bond debt and $2 million in interest. So
That's on the roofs. You're talking about.
so you know that the 4 circles we showed using the bond debt. to
You
reinvest?
didn't want to do a bond, you thought it was not worth
Yeah.
it.
Correct.
Okay.
And we, right, so the overhead, we said, let's go get a number on that overhead. That overhead is $450,000 a year in debt service payment for 20 years and $2 million in revenue. So by keeping so if someone says, hey, you're overtaxing me because you're not using your bond debt, give that back in a tax credit. We could do that. Then fixing the roofs would mean we'd have to look at a bond. And I would argue, and I think Mr. Martino's on the same page, we'd be overtaxing the community by paying $2 million in interest and a $450,000 annual payment for 20 years to do the same project.
So we're saving $2 million.
In interest alone.
Right.
You say $450,000 payment and like when I pay my mortgage, it's interest and why you keep saying 450 plus 2.
Well, it's not so much plus, but in that $450,000 payment, it would be $2 million.
$2 million over the 20 years.
Over the course of 20 years. Yeah, sorry. That was
Makes sense.
That's helpful.
Yeah, I mean, we've long talked about the debt service line and the dollars that are there, and I do think it's, it's prudent to salt those away, and then we'll pull them back out, do moves and stuff. And to just echo the Moody's presentation, they were quite impressed that we already had our payment structure set up where it didn't need a bond to pass, a budget to pass, because we already have money allocated in debt service for all future payments of the bond with it too. So they're quite good.
To be talked about more at region.
And future question.
All right.
There was a question about the revenue and that it appeared to be under budget by 410,000. Yep, exactly. That was the excess cost that the state had promised and then reduced. The current proposed budget that you have in front of you originally realized that $410,000. However, the Friday before we gave it to you, when Tea Leaves said that they were going to add that back in, we went and redid the budget. The budget you have in front of you would have been about 0.5% higher had we not realized that. So the risk is that there has been no legislative action to restore the 40 million into next year's budget. We're taking it on faith a little bit that because they did it this year, it would make sense that they're going to not take it less than that next year. All right, so this is kind of a long, I'm going to not dive too much into it, but there's a digital record here. It's online. These questions will be posted. But there's some charts going around that tracks, and this is specific to the town of Middlebury. And several of you asked questions about that the school budget as a percent and growth over time. So there's And I do not want to get into somebody else's sandbox. I want to give you the information that you asked for, and do so without judgment. The documents that are being published are here, and they start in 1995, 96. So I did go back historically to 95, 96, and you know what, I think the ECS got dumped above it, but they're related. So the ECS calculation is a state grant that goes to communities. It does not go to the school district. Called educational cost sharing. Very confusing. It's different than the excess cost grant. I don't know why they make them sound the same, but very confusing. And you can see that from the last 3 or 4 years specifically, what happened back in 2020, 2021, the formula for ECS was reevaluated, and it was determined that certain communities were underfunded. And so the calculation redone, and the districts that had been kind of restricted in some of the funding they received started to get an increase in that. So that's where you see this kind of big uptick in Middlebury over the last 3 or 4 years, since 2022, it looks like here. The other piece that the chart above that was created outside of the regional school district is it doesn't take into account the enrollment shift. And so I pointed back to the ADM, that's the average daily membership in each community. And the way the regional school district charter is set up is that on October 1st of every year, we calculate the percentage of students from each town. Went back to 95, 96, that's when the chart began. And in 95, 96, Middlebury's ADM was 26% of the school district's budget. In the budget that you have in front of you, it's 34%. So there's almost a 10% increase in enrollment. So the other kind of compounding factor is you had a lower percentage on a lower budget. So now you have 10% more on a budget that is, whatever that is, 30 years. Makes me feel bad to say that that's 30 years ago, because that was after I graduated high school, but 30 years of compounding budgets. So you're 10% higher on a budget that's base is higher. The other interesting thing in reading through minutes from 1995 was that at the time that year, the ADM shift, Middlebury was 0.45 and Southbury was 12.1. So when you look at this chart here that is been in our budget presentation for the last 5 or 6 years, the 90s had a lot of above the line is Southbury's red, and above the line means that Southbury had the positive student enrollment, and below the line is the proportionate shift. And then after the 2000s, that enrollment shift really went towards Middlebury. And so I don't have the next 20 years, but it is interesting that if you think of the life cycle of some of our families that move here with young children, and then when they're empty nesters, they sell to a new family with young children, it tracks with some of the demography on that. Also in here there's building projects and houses. There's a lot in this, but I just thought it was interesting. I wasn't necessarily looking for the enrollment shift, but they were talking about it at the time. I tried to put as much information from those minutes there. The other piece is in item C, the town budget separates their capital budget from their operating budget. I don't know how that chart was developed. Our capital didn't exist a few years ago, but it's in our operating budget. So I believe Middlebury's capital was about 1.2 million or something like that. So, and it didn't appear that it was in that chart. So I think all of those kinds of comparisons are a little dangerous to make oversimplified. There was a question about state regulations and some of the requirements. And so a couple of years ago, I gave to the finance boards when they came to our meeting a packet. In 2016, there was a study commissioned to look at unfunded mandates. I think it's 16 pages long in small font. It's on our website. There's a link to it there. That was almost 10 years ago now. None of those mandates went away, and there's 10 more years of mandates that have been added. But it gives you an idea of some of the things that contribute to the budgets. There's another question here, about the, difference in school district budgets in towns. I don't manage a town budget, so I don't want to, again, play in somebody else's sandbox. But when you look at the amount of, legislation that's required by school districts, and again, I'm not looking to, like, the transportation is an interesting one, right? Like the town doesn't run school buses. That's a big line. The town doesn't run special education services. There's a lot of mandated things that fall into our budget, the training, and we're just a lot bigger. We have 700 employees. I don't remember each town, but it's a lot less than 700 in the scope of what they do. Medical pooling. Oh, I don't know back. We didn't get back to this question.
That's right.
We talked about who's going to answer it, but
That's right.
The medical pooling piece, I'll speak quickly, but Southbury no longer participates. They went out on their own. Being a self-op medical pooling, I would argue we have a lot more consistency year to year over our medical, while this year is high. And I say high, 13 there. Lots of my peers would be very excited to get a 13. One is over 30. So we have a little more control and ownership over how we manage those costs. And if there's savings, we're able to realize those costs, where if you're not a self-operated and there's savings, those are not realized by the district, but by the company. So historical staffing. So a couple of things I put in here. All of these positions are outlined in budget presentations since 2018, and there's a lot more detail on these, including the rationale. The positions below do not indicate if they were funded by the operating budget or by grants. It gets a little more like wonky to put on charts the more we start parsing it out. So this is kind of like 50,000 foot view. The other piece that I would encourage people to go and look at the budget presentations from those years, because a lot of these positions, although added, came at cost savings. Even the CLP program we're talking about adding now has offsets and outplacement that are going to have return on investment and create efficiency. I tried to put an asterisk next to some of the positions that are tied to mandatory services. For example, paraprofessionals, we're going to see what is probably an eye-opening number of almost 40 paras added over that time. We don't add paras unless they're part of an IEP that is driven by a student. That's true of some of the nursing that we've added to the district, that they're there because the student has needs. And then I tried to put some notes in the bottom around what types of positions we added and where, just so you had a little bit of line of sight without having to go to each of the budgets for the years. Right, all of those. Believe all of them. There was one second grade position that I think was added in 2019 or 2020 that was enrollment driven and added midstream. I feel like we added it like the second week of August or second week of September or the first week of August, somewhere right before school started. I didn't do the research for that yet, but it's documented somewhere. It just didn't go big enough. But I believe other than that one, we haven't added a midstream out of budget cycle position.
This is a very helpful chart. I really, yeah, thank you for putting it all together. I liked it. Thank you.
Sure. Well, one of the interesting things, I hadn't looked at it this way, but we've talked about, and you've heard it tonight, about the shift in social emotional. And while we've added some staff, and people will say declining enrollment and you're adding staff, the elementary positions we added were to protect and maintain those class sizes over the last 5 or 6 years. And then the majority of those positions are really about social emotional, and BCBAs and social workers and instructional coaches. So it's just interesting to. Oh, sorry, one more question that came in. Question came in about non-recurring expenses. Is there a way to kind of fund next year's projects through some of the unencumbered money left at the end of this year? And what's interesting is there's really not a lot of our budget is reoccurring. And there's been a shift over the last 10 years that our vendors are moving to a licensing standpoint, so even more things. You know, you used to be able to like buy textbooks and bring down, we can't really do that anymore. So the three things, we talked at the March finance and a little bit, I think, the last budget meeting about adjusting some of the earned interest revenue based on actuals. That's something to put out there. So this year, we increased the technology lease by 40,000 to take advantage of a state reimbursement to upgrade some of our switches. We could keep that flat and buy some of those switches. That would save about 40,000. And then it's interesting that you asked Mr. Plasky about some of the items on that property line. I think some of those things we can offload. And depending on how the board wanted to look at that revenue, you know, you have, you know, maybe 200,000 or so. If that's a place that you wanted to look.
100,000 in realized revenue.
Well, I think that's that would be a risk tolerance conversation for the board to have. I think right now we're about 100,000 over projection in our actual revenue. Right? We budgeted 150. I think we're at 280 now.
Exactly.
Something like that. So there's like a real 100,000 there. And then if you do the 40 and the 35, you're at 175. Maybe you're like 125 in that revenue. But again, that's kind of like risk. I don't want to. I'm happy to support you. The risk tolerance I think that we're at is that the revenue, the actual revenue reflected so far is pretty safe. I think there's probably a discussion, you know, of risk tolerance above that. But there's probably some, you know, we're not over through the year. The SNF account will probably grow a little bit next year. I don't know what interest rates will do.
There's a couple rate cuts coming, but we did kind of give a conservative estimate in there. So I do think this.
There was the possibility of a rate cut today in the Fed technology.
Yeah, they did. They said
So
there's
one milestone down.
They said there's two coming this year somewhere.
But on the other hand, I thought it was interesting, we had a discussion where the principal on which we were in interest is going to be greater next year.
Right.
Yeah.
So that it might
yeah.
offset some of that risk as well.
Yeah.
Sure that we're earning money on more money.
Right. Any more questions on the questions?
Can we go back to the debt service line and because I think one of the concerns that have been raised is sort of why would the roofs be in, like, why would the roof be there versus like their own line? Because it's not, because debt service, I think like to someone, it kind of means like, okay, this is a debt we have to pay on. And so it's like, it's non-negotiable. Not that the place the roofs is, but it connotes a certain thing versus actually kind of putting in what I plan it as a separate line. So I guess I'm just wondering about that.
Yeah, I think that's a philosophical comment. Like, so we transfer these most likely to like the capital account and then do the roof from the capital. You might transfer that to the non-recurring capital based on like state reimbursement cycles and timing and things. There's different ways to manage that. I think the long-term goal is that, and I did put it in there, is that eventually we're going to have to do something with PES and GPS. We don't know what that is. It might be repairs, it might be replacement, I don't know. But at that time, we're going to need a bond. And if you decimate that account, then what's going to happen is when we execute the bond for those schools, you're going to see like a 9 or 10% school budget increase. Where if you can maintain that debt service line and smooth it, maybe you'll see an additional, say, 3%. And you won't see that huge bump. But I do think that question is, we're trying to not be transparent by saying, this is what we're going to do. And it's almost like avoiding debt service account to some extent. And that's a practice that the pay-as-you-go model is you park it there because if you don't pay as you go, that's the line.
Thank you.
Right, any more questions? So that concludes our workshop. And any other presentations that are going to come to the board. Typically at this time, we do like a pulse check where board members are, just to have an idea of, you know, what board members are thinking or what more information they would like, or so what do people feel about this proposed budget for 449? Go ahead, Tom.
Well, to answer your question, I feel better about it this year than last year, right? So, let's back up and thank everyone who kind of put this together. I know it's a tremendous amount of work that goes into it. And I'm really appreciative of how the budget was built this year. Like, I think it was conservative and everything in here is defensible. And, you know, we've now spent the year kind of outlining the path for why we made the decisions in this budget cycle that we did. So I'm really appreciative of, you know, all the time leading up to this and then the actual construction of the budget. I would say that, you know, the budget aside, the school district does find itself in a really unique position this year, which is we have a very strong cash position as we approach the end of the year. We're anticipating a big surplus. And that's, thank you again for, you know, managing the budget this year the way we did and staying within our line items. You know, a couple other factors, we've talked about that, you know, advantageous rate environment that we're in and the legislative action. So those three things combined have put us in a really strong cash on hand position. So what I would like to have conversations about at this table is, can we use those advantages to reduce the budget for next year in a responsible way? And by responsible, I mean, I wouldn't look to touch anything that is a recurring one. Because you've drilled it into our heads that if you do that, it's only going to catch up with you later down the road.
Cliff.
Pardon?
Makes a fiscal cliff.
It makes a fiscal cliff, that's right. So, but as I hear about, you know, some of the good fortune we've experienced, it's clear to me that you would very easily find $300,000+ that we could apply in a responsible way next year. And I recommend looking at three things. One, yes, like we are on track to realize $135,000 more in interest income than we have budgeted next year. We don't have to, we can risk, you know, we can do risk tolerance and not claim that whole 135,000, but there's a big there's a big range between where we are at 150 and where we are projecting to be, which might be as high as 300 this year if we're not going to have a rate cut here today. But call it 280, which I think is what you projected. That's 130 grand. So for the sake of this argument and round numbers, let's say we realize another 100 grand in revenue next year. That's just free money, and there's a good chance there's going to be some increase over the year. If we look at what Josh just gave us in terms of things we pay down, you know, we could have that discussion. We don't have to get too granular, but I think there's at least $50,000 here that expenses that are non-recurring that we could just use our surplus to pay down and take out of next year's budget. And then the last thing I'd say is we now have this educational expense fund that policy is just talked about writing. A policy for which will be coming to the board at our next regular meeting, I think, for first read. And we've talked about how we can use that as our special education contingency. Right now, that's set up as a $290,000 recurring line item. And I don't think that's the most efficient way to do it. Doesn't give the board good feedback in terms of whether or not we need it and how much we're using. But if we're to put that into a non-recurring account like this educational expense fund, we can monitor it year over year and hopefully that grows. Because we don't, the fact is, if we kept it the way it is, we don't know if 290 is enough next year or if it's too much. Right? But by transferring that from a recurring item to a non-recurring item, we have better control year over year of what we think we might need to backstop any additional costs. And now, action in Hartford if we're not getting the promised amount we're expecting. So, you know, you could take 200 of that 290, you know, and make that and seed that fund. And let's seed that fund above and beyond the 290 we're talking about. That could be the entirety of the 430 that was just sent back to us. We'd be working with a larger special education contingency. Hopefully some of that carries over year to year and continues to grow. And we can take some of that out of this year's budget. So if you took 200 from there, if you took the 50 in pay down costs and 100 in realized revenue, that's a very easy 350 grand that we would not feel in terms of cutting any services or programs or staff positions. It's just using the circle. And I'm hearing the questions. People are, I did not submit those questions, but people are asking, are we over budgeting? in a year where we're lucky to find ourselves in an advantageous position, it would be a really nice gesture to take some of that money, put it back and lower the tax burden next year.
Just clarification question on the numbers. I wrote down 135K interest. And I wrote down 280, and then you threw some, where did that?
No, he had 130 in interest, 100 in revenue.
So I believe if I looked at the attachment correct from the last finance meeting, we're projecting $285,000 in interest revenue. Next year, we have projected that at $150,000.
Actual revenue collected this year, we're gonna be around 2 weeks.
280 in revenue.
We budgeted 150 next year.
Okay.
At the time, we were not trending as high as we are, but we're gonna.
So over two might be. Yeah, budgeted 150, we're at 280.
Yeah, it's not 100. But we can just project to take in more interest, which it looks like we're on track to do.
Yeah, so if you went the example, we had projected 285. We're budgeting for next year for revenue 150. So again, very conservatively, you can pull $100,000 higher at projecting 250. As soon as a rate cut or some squaring there. But again, there is a higher base you're gonna have too. So it's gonna be a factor. So yeah.
Okay, still confused though. I mean, for just because there's a lot of, okay, we have extra money from interest this year. Right? Is that true or false?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so where you were talking about maybe buying down the things on the last page.
Yeah,
Not with the.
separate item. Yeah, separate
Interest
item.
just reduce the budget $100,000. We project up revenue, drop the budget that goes through.
So now we're going to talk about the budget. So how much did you have budgeted for interest in this budget we're talking about right now?
150.
150. And
Yes.
we're saying that is possibly unrealistic because it could be.
We're projecting 285,000
For this year.
this year.
So the assumption is that it's safe to say, if you change next year's budget from 150 to 250. That's still less than we are collecting
Yes.
this year.
Yes.
And that will still be seen as conservative if the interest rates that we're collecting at.
So we projected at 250 for next year. How are you saying that's going to, how would you like to use just that 250 to impact the budget?
So when you raise the revenue collected by 100,
It'll lower.
but it lowers the principal that we ask the towns.
All right,
So
so that's interest.
So for example, if you did that 100,000, you'd be at 4.38 if you upped $100,000 on the interest.
Then you went on, because there were more numbers that got us to 3 something.
Yeah, so that's one bucket, and then the other two buckets I'd like to look at would be applying the expected like surplus, what would you like me to say? The expected
Unexpended fund
unencumbered
balance.
Right.
dollars.
Right.
To, the very few property items that we could buy down that wouldn't recur year over year. So it's not gonna necessarily haunt us.
Right.
Right.
You said 50,000 non-reoccurring.
Yeah, Josh has 70 on this page, 75 on this page. Make it whatever number you want, but I put 50 for a nice round.
All right, so I had 100 plus my 50.
Yeah.
And then you were talking about the.
So, yeah, the
Special
special education contingency, which right now is a $290,000 recurring line item in our budget.
And repairs, yes. And you wanted to.
I'd like to reduce
lower
that, but the reason I feel like we can do that is because we can now seed and build up this educational expense fund, which can backstop and serve as our special education contingency.
Right, which we're gonna do, you would do this year, just to see that.
Yeah.
Okay. So the contingency was 290. You weren't suggesting eliminating the whole. You were.
No, I
suggesting-
wouldn't bring it down to zero because I do think year over year, we probably want to keep something there so you can continue to directly seed that fund, because it's not a one-time thing. We want it to accumulate. So if you left it at 100,000, and then next year it's still 100,000, or maybe it even grows, but that money goes directly into that fund. So it continues to grow or replace what we might have to do.
And what do you seed? Where are you gonna get the seed money?
Well,
Like,
we could take the whole $430,000 check we're gonna be receiving from
So you're talking about trying to use the special ed, the $40 million.
Yeah.
And trying to use some of that money to seed the education expense fund, which was gonna be limited to special ed. And then you can lower the proposed budgets, sped contingency by a certain amount.
Correct.
Because we already have like some money in a reserve pot.
Correct. Yes, correct.
So there's the question about I thought, so we were expecting a 72% reimbursement. Then we were like, oh gosh, they just told us it was 60. So the difference between the 60 and the 72% is that 470.
Not exactly. So there's one step you missed in there. We were expecting, so this year we budgeted 65%.
Oh, okay.
In October, they told us we were gonna get 60%. So when we built next year's budget, originally we budgeted at 60%. And then the day before, we were able to readjust that, but the delta for this year.
Well, this time last year, you were thinking 65%.
Yes.
And so that's really gonna be 70.
In next year's proposed budget, it's 73%.
Yes, but in terms of the $40 million, our share of that $40 million.
That returned this year,
Yeah.
73%.
Right, so you were thinking 65 and now it's really gonna be 70. So the found money is the difference between 65 and 70. Found.
In this year's budget. Yeah.
This year's budget. Yes, but that speaks to if he is suggesting to move it.
Into that reserve.
Right, so the difference of this 65% to 70, some 3% is that's the course I have. I just want to make sure it was truly like found, like I didn't.
Yeah, I just want to be careful.
Things
So,
that-
yeah, so I want to be careful to say it was found, because in October, when the state told us we weren't getting that, that's when we started turning down some of the dials. The other thing that helped us this year, and that why this is a good year, you mentioned two things, but the third is that we budgeted for 2 students to be outplaced that moved out of town. And so like, I would say like, that is not a regular occurrence and not something that my peers say very often. So we did catch a little bit of lightning in a bottle between all those things. And the difference between the 65% and the 73% would have been higher if those students were here, because our excess cost money that we applied for would have been higher. So
I was gonna ask this question, I think you just answered it, right? Because if you're at 65, you find out in October, it's 30. And I mean, like, there wasn't like a necessary, like, I mean, I remember you being worried, but it wasn't like a panic, right? Like, we weren't going to.
well, in part, we had 290 special ed contingency that we would have went to that would have helped cover us. So our $460,000 hole would have been 460 minus 290, whatever that is.
Yes, question. The student, is it the fund that you said, is it student education fund or?
Educational expense.
So that would be basically a holdover year over year.
No different count.
So in the 27, right, 26, 27 budget. That could offset if the reimbursement significantly drops.
Use it
Because I
anyway.
think that's the concern, right?
Yeah.
Like, they were teetering this year, it came through, but I'm concerned about 26, 27. Ultimately raising our overarching budget wicked high. And so the idea here is some of this could potentially offset how much it would do, right? But is that kind of the thinking? I just,
Well, and the other piece, so the good news about the 26, 27, that's the second year of the biennium.
Yeah.
So we'll have a long lead time to know how much we don't know how much the ask will be from districts. So there's always a risk with that line.
and that's the piece that I worry about, because I appreciate the thinking. And and we don't know, right? There's no crystal ball. But I am concerned for 26, 27 and how some of this impacts that.
Well, and if you were to
Yeah.
take like the 425
Yeah.
and unexpected turnaround funds from the state this year. And you took the 232 in last year's you put them both in that account. Now you'd be sitting on a pretty good number that would start to generate interest too. So that fund could then kind of grow, even if we added nothing to it, the interest would start to generate 30 to 50,000 a year to help grow that account. I don't have my actuary, I don't know, don't quote me on the 30 to 50, but 680,000 at 4% a year.
Anyone else wanna?
Right.
Nick, let's do.
So, I would just echo Tom's introductory comments, about his introductory, about the budget. I still, and I've tried, and I still, for the same reasons last year, cannot get really past the fact that the last several were so high relative, to our history, and that this is still, high. Again, relative to our history. I have a concern, I think when we look at this chart and see it spiked, and people didn't want to vote for budgets in here because they kept looking back. And at some point, I don't want to be, several years looking back and then saying it went up, blah, blah, blah. And maybe that causes us some pain in the future, but I mean, in truth, I mean, the reason I appreciated the answers about the per pupil. And I think you went to the ed site to pull out the difference. How would you know what Cheshire spends on transportation? So then I went to ed site too, thinking like, oh, that's a great idea. And using the towns that we used in the assessment presentation, when we compared the SAT scores and all that, SBAC. So there's 4 or 5 towns: Cheshire, Newtown, Avon, a couple, but Monroe. When you look at next gen, whether you look at students to FTE, or whether you look at students to total amount of employees, or whether you look at students to total amount of employees less, don't factor paras in, and all that information is in the next gen. We have more, our ratios are, we always have more per than anybody else. We have more FTEs than those people. We have more, just more employees. And it has special education funding, and what the districts spend on special education funding. And I know that it probably can be reported differently. But all those towns spend 25% or less, say, on special education, and we're spending 32% of our entire budget on special education. I know we're bringing those people in house, that might drive down some numbers, but we've added, not counting paras, 17 people, I think, in the last 4 budgets, and I understand the need for those, social emotional support, special ed, but I just feel like these 4 budgets over time, it's over 20% that we've counting this one, or no? Yeah, well, over time, I don't know if I did, the last 4 of them counting this one that we're talking about, over a 20% increase, it just still doesn't sit well with me, that even though that probably would pass. And I know we need those capital repairs, I just struggle with putting that out there to the taxpayer. That's where I'm at. I would like it to be lower. It might sound capricious, but I think, I would love to try and get it cut by 0.5%. And I think what Tom was saying gets us at least halfway, or more than halfway. I'll just conclude. really, I was thinking about the, towns that are municipal school districts. And those towns are told, I feel like, superintendent comes out and says, I need 9%. Well, nowhere, Barbie land, maybe you might get the 9%, but that's not gonna really happen. So those supers ask for the world, knowing that I think that the boards of finance are gonna come back and say, look, yeah, and then they decide what to cut. And that works for most districts that, that we share the dirt with and have similar test scores with. But what we end up doing is like coming at it from the reverse, where we're like, well, like, what about this or what about that? And everything like in just these little chunks is never really gonna matter. It's like we could talk about 100,000. That's nothing, right? Like if you're gonna try and it's like, what could we cut? Like we could cut the data management. Well, it's only gonna be 70,000. Like, what's that really? Like we come at it that way. I just feel like at this point, I'm just gonna be like, I just think it should be lower. It should be, and I've come up, I think we should try and shave 0.5%. How we get there, honestly, if we can't even agree that it should be lower, there's just no point of even discussing what we might cut. Like I don't want these protracted discussions like we had last year about all these different things. Like I either feel you either think it should be lower or not, and if you think it should be lower, then let's work on what we're going to do to make it. So I've struggled with this, and if the assessment data hadn't been as strong as it was, I really would have been like, yes, this needs, but I feel like that's hopefully troughed. And, we've added extra teachers to support teams, the teams model of Rochambeau. And when we added them, we got this chart. It was like, oh, all these other districts we went to, and oh my God, like, I was like, I can't, like, we absolutely need those teachers. So we added them in. We added the coaches in because I believe like coaching model is, is something that other districts were supporting. And now, we want to add a facilities manager, and it's like, oh, we should have had one. We want to add a data analyst. It was like most districts have them. Like we are always behind the 8 ball, and yet we still have more administrative people, more employees per student. Like, how does this happen? So that's why I want to take it down 0.5%. Like that's just right. And I don't want to detract from the good work. And I always feel like if you want to cut it, I'm not saying that there hasn't been growth, and we've had a wonderful report and they're all doing a great job. But at some point, I feel like we have to draw a line.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.
What is 0.5%?
480,000.
Yeah. 480. Yeah.
Superintendent.
Anyone else have anything to say? No.
No comment.
No. Okay. Sally?
I don't think I'm as strong as Steve, but I do think that with the strength of our financial position, with some of it was not anticipated, I would be in favor of reducing it a little bit. I'm not sure that 0.5%, to me, it's more a responsible thing to do with having the funds available rather than actually putting a certain number. For me, that's. I agree with that.
I mean, I'm hearing that too. I'd be okay reducing, somewhat. I don't know if I could get down to the 0.5. I'd like to see it more, probably at the 150. We start talking there. But I also. I do struggle. I'll be honest that the towns have such high reserves and we don't, and we have bigger facilities. And we have $1 million in our capital reserve right now.
1,000,003. if-
$1,000,003.
if Depending how you count the educational expense.
Right, okay, so like we have approximately 1.3 million in reserves. Right, but Middlebury is at 14 million, Southbury is at 30 million, we're not even gonna reach them anytime soon.
That's true.
So that just is like. I'm very cognizant, that we have aging buildings, and not a lot of reserves to address that. And when Joe was talking about, it was a couple of board meetings ago about the HVAC units at the high school, I was like starting to twitch. Hearing how many multi-million-dollar units we have that are from 1979. And I have been on the board when one thing busts and it, you know, was a $600,000 boiler at Gainfield, and it just that would take care of, you get 2 of those incidents happening and there goes our reserves. So I'm very nervous about that. At the same time, I'm very open to the idea of, you know, taking advantage of the earned interest situation. And the revenue. So I'm definitely willing to talk and consider, like Sally said, reducing it, you know, a little bit. As I said, but I don't know about 1.5%.
So one point I want to put on the record is some of the reasons that we had those low budgets that you refer back to was because we did defer a lot of maintenance and we had no investment in our repairs. Our maintenance accounts were $100,000 over. So I do think part of the reason that this budget was better than last year's from that is we have over that time been able to heal some of those accounts and bring our maintenance accounts where our actuals and budgeted are close. And so I don't know just the world that we're in if we're ever going to return to 2% budgets. You know, but I also know that we can't live in a 6. So I think that our work the last 3 to 4 years, 5 years, since 2019 has been really about healing those accounts. So we have furniture replacement plans and we have playground replacement plans and all of those things so that it is built into an annual budget cycle, which is part of the reason. The downside is that there's not a lot of non-recurring, but it does smooth out the peaks and valleys. And, you know, 2 or 3 years of zeros and ones, you feed off of, you know, your muscles and you damage the core. And so if we can heal those, you know, 3 years of zeros creates 15 years of pain. And I just want to be responsible about how we can certainly find ways to bring the number down. And that's why we built it. Risk tolerance should be a collective conversation, as should maintenance. You know, I don't want to ever cut a maintenance line and not be transparent about what might break. So, you know, we're happy to help however we can inform that conversation.
So to acknowledge that there are 4 board members that aren't here tonight, and I think that that's an important consideration. It's definitely one for me, and as much as I value the perspective around this room, I definitely want to hear from the other 4.
I think that's frustrating for me too, because we're here having a conversation, we're gonna be having the same conversation next time when we're all here again. So.
Well, we all know where we are, and then we just
Yeah.
integrate them.
Can I just ask for you to discuss this? So the new educational expense. What are the restrictions on what that can be used for, and like what would be the downside to funding it? Pretty significant, I guess is.
So there,
Can you just review that?
as
Review it for me?
Chairperson Manzo said, when you compare our reserve, remember, we're not a regular school district. We are a standalone fiduciary agent. Our reserves are comparatively low to other fiduciary agents, even irresponsible ones, right? So when you look at a $94 million budget and you call it $2 million in reserve if you want, percentage-wise, that's not a lot. So I would say there's no downside in generating. I mean, again, as a taxpayer in the community, if we don't fund the reserves accounts and we don't have a rainy day fund, when it rains, we're going to go back or we're going to destroy programs in order to fix the leak. So having it is responsible. Now the piece of the capital reserve, the educational fund, is the restrictions we put on are mostly ours.
Okay, that's right.
Right, like we actually, one of the concerns when this was passed in Hartford was the fiscal discipline of boards and not build it up and then rate it to buy down a budget one year. with reoccurring costs. So we should only buy non-reoccurring expenses in that account. And whether that is, but it can replace the capital, we can buy capital out of that, and it could be special education. Special education, I think, is one of the reasons that's there, because the volatility, again, we were fortunate this year to be, fortunate, 2 students we planned on, supporting in an outplaced facility, they moved. Usually the opposite happens, you know, where you have students move in and you don't have a backstop. And then you get into a very unfortunate conversation about not doing something you won't work with the option. So.
It's a unicorn year.
It is
Should
what
take
it is.
advantage.
Yeah, no,
And what's happened with
it's-
the SNF account is that investment account that if you get to a certain number. I don't know that a 4% or 4.5% return is something that we can bank on long term. But I also think that it's not gonna go to 1% anytime soon. So the more you have in that account, you're now generating kind of free money for taxpayers that help build a backstop and as a cost of something.
Capital reserve gets about 35 to 45,000 a year. If you do nothing, you'll prove that.
And the towns are able to do that with their.
Yeah, the towns, Southbury, Middlebury, well do that every day. It's a far larger dollar value.
Yep.
I will give you a preview of the policy. Since you know.
Yes, I know. This is
Oh,
very in the dark about.
Oh.
She left, don't tell her.
And Steve misses one finance meeting and he's like, how does interest work? So the policy, like the policy that we've drafted, that'll come forward for review. The language suggests that we intend to use this as our special ed backstop. However, I think it's a 2/3 vote.
Two-thirds.
2/3, okay, yeah, so with a 2/3 vote of the board, it could be used for uses other than special ed. So we wanted some kind of control on it to guard against what Josh was saying, like, who knows who's sitting in these seats years from now? There's a pot of money sitting there, you don't want people to rate it. But if there's an emergency, those funds would be accessible for any educational expense. So I don't think there's any harm in that.
That's helpful because it's not having to come to.
Yeah.
All right, any other discussion points?
I think, the next, I've been saying for the last 2 meetings, that I was thinking about canceling, March 24th. Our regular Board of Ed meeting on that Monday, March 24th. Because we've had so many meetings, us and special meetings lately. So I'm inclined to cancel March 24th, which means that our next meeting would be March 26th. And that is our combined Board of Ed, Board of Finance meeting. It's our public hearing on the budget, and then we can have another opportunity for discussion. Similar to tonight, picking up where we left off here. And then our budget vote would be on April 7th. What I ideally want to do is have a discussion at a board level prior to April 7th. So if there's anything else the board needs, any more information, that we have that prior to the actual night of the budget votes.
That would be next Wednesday. So if we're canceling.
Right, yeah, a week from today.
Yeah.
We have our Board of Ed, Board of Finance meeting, the public hearing on the budget, and then we can have another discussion on the budget.
Are we looking for a motion to cancel one day?
No, I'm just canceling it.
Okay.
It's like a snow day.
It's like a snow day.
Also, because normally we don't speak during, but there's not a dialogue. When the boards of finance are there, right? So we're kind of talking at them, they may ask some questions. I think there's an issue about reserves. I think it's a good question to put to them. Like, if they are saying, you know what, yeah, like, we think you really should, like, get some of these reserves, like, take care of your roofs, like, I think that says a lot. I'm interested in hearing that opinion.
It can be a dialogue.
Yeah.
We've invited them.
Yeah, we talk about
Normally we don't. I don't, first off, there's never enough time. Because the other meeting's scheduled to start at 6:30, so unless you want to schedule like as soon as we're done, we have like a 5-minute recess or something, and then we go right into the public hearing. So yes, if there's a space for me to ask that question, then I'll ask it.
Okay, well, I'll try to make sure you have the space.
All right, so Sharon, did you have any questions? No? All right. All right, so I'll let the other board member, I haven't gotten to comments from citizens. I almost did that. So the Board of Education will recognize citizens of Middlebury and Shasberry, and citizens are asked to state their name, their town of residence, and to limit their comments to 3 minutes. I knew that you weren't gonna comment. Okay. All right, so we're canceling the March 24th meeting. So our next meeting will be 1 week from today, March 26th. Does it start at 6:30? 6:30. Thank you, Jennifer. All right, may I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you, Heather. I didn't even ask for it.
I was waiting.
All right, who's did the second? All right, second by